Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Curious Midlife. And I'm really excited today to get into the weeds of movement snacks and all things movement, life, diverse journeys that get us to those places. My guest today is Trisha Durham, who is a movement person who is kind of the teacher of teachers, as well as being someone who teaches other normal people just like you and me. So I discovered Trisha on Instagram. And Trisha, welcome. How would you introduce yourself? My introductions are getting worse each podcast episode.
No, that did a good job of there. Hi. Yeah. I think yeah, I consider myself a movement educator and a yoga teacher.
And
Yeah.
how because I see a lot of the things you do, and there are a lot of really similar things that I do. And you have a book called Movement Snacks,
Yeah.
which I just love. And this phrase, like, it's not exclusive to anyone. Like I think I want it to be, I love that it's kind of like the vernacular. It's the everyday language of, like, there's so many of us who are all on the same page about movement snacks, and I really love that. But your background is as a dancer, a PADI dive instructor, many things. So can you share some of your story as much as
Yeah.
you want to or not today?
Yeah. No, I think what it comes down to is that everything I've kind of pursued in life has I've always found a way, it always has included movement, right? In all of the jobs I've had, like it's always come back to movement, right? Like even like scuba diving, right? Teaching as a PADI scuba instructor, right? Teaching people how to move underwater. Even it's probably not listed anywhere on my website, but I was a bartender for 10 years, and I found even a way to turn that into movement. I did flair bartending competitions where you throw and flip the bottles around. So just everything I have woven movement into, because it's just in my DNA. I started as a dancer at a very young age and danced my whole life, professionally and whatnot. So everything has always, the common thread is movement.
I want to go back to this bar thing. It's like, so
Yeah.
you're like the Tom Cruise cocktail, like
Yeah.
you are throw and catch, you are
Yeah.
coordination, but with glass objects. Like I stand outside and I throw balls and my dog jumps
Yeah.
up and I'm like, oh, that's,
Mm-hmm.
so how, like, I mean, so as a dancer, anyone who I've like trained with or move or comes to one of my classes, if their movement journey has started with dance, I always say to them, like, you have this incredible movement library in your brain. Like, even if you haven't moved or danced for like 20 years, 30 years, like, there's a movement library there that the rest of us don't even see the shelves of those books and those kind of stories. And for a lot of dancers I've met who stop, they have a kind of quite emotional relationship with dance. The same with gymnastics. Like it seems like some people's journeys can be really brutal, or others can be playful. Like I did ballet for like 4 years, and I really liked the bit at the end when they would put on music and you could just like move
Yeah.
around the room. And then it got to the point where that was the only part that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And still to this day, I don't have the reflex to point my toes or do anything like that. So, I mean, scuba diving is also a very free, although it's obviously for safety wise, it's rooted in structure
Mm-hmm.
and discipline and a relationship with the environment, but to know where your body is in space.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've talked a lot already. What do you see like, what can you recognize in yourself are the common traits? Because these all seem like they're complex movement patterns, but there's a creativity and there's a flow to your
Yeah, I think
stories.
I've always been a curious person by nature. And so that has probably propelled me to where I am now with movement, and as a movement teacher, right? So, as a dancer, a classically trained dancer, it was very structured, right? Ballet, very specific and structured in technique. And then as yoga, when I got into yoga, it was Ashtanga. That was all that was around at the time. And that was very structured and technique. So that was a very easy, transition for me from ballet to yoga or to Ashtanga. And I was good at that because I was used to technique. I was used to lines and symmetry. So that in the beginning was great because it was just a similar discipline. It was very disciplined, both of those. And so I think that's what's kind of, allows me to be a little bit unique in my approach now, because it's not like I've always just been, real fluid and open and flow and curious. Like, I came from a very structured background of movement. I've done it that way. I've done it well, this is right, that's wrong. I've done it that way. And now I'm enjoying this, approach to where it's like, there is no wrong way to move, right? There's just movement that your body's either prepared to do or not. So, and exploring that, right? So, I'm glad that I've had kind of that full spectrum of structured, precise movement all the way through to kind of where I'm at. And it's just a kind of an ever evolving process. It's process. Movement is process.
And how have you felt that this kind of movement journey of, you've done the rigor, you've done the discipline, you've done the exact, and it's kind of like, we always say, oh, you learn words and then you put them into sentences, and then, you do that, and then you create poetry. So how has it felt for you? How have you changed in that process of moving out from this rigor and this exact precision kind of environment into something that you've created in your own way? What's that journey been like?
Yeah. Well, I think what really spurred that shift or transition was the people that I was teaching, the people that were coming to my classes, and seeing how that, kind of very specific technique and correct way of moving in yoga wasn't really working for people. It worked for a few. And then that just got boring. That just got old for it to only ever, work for a few. I just more and more noticed how many people were kind of being left out of that long term, and yet more and more people were coming to yoga to feel better in their body. There's a lot of debate in terms of what is and is not yoga, but when people have, and they do have, their physicians telling them go to yoga for stress relief, for pain, they're coming to yoga for that reason, whether you think that's a legit reason or not. And so I want to be able to help those people. And I just found that this strict way of moving and symmetry and where your knee is placed, it just wasn't working, and something needed. I didn't want to continue to be a part of that, such that narrow slice of movement. I wanted more people to be able to move, and I wanted more people to be able to enjoy moving. I saw people feel worse because they're coming to yoga and they couldn't do the thing, or it hurt to do the thing. And I was like, wow, this isn't how this should work. So I started to shift. I started to change. I started to educate myself and kind of study movement outside of the yoga. And that's what kind of blew things wide open, was when I started looking at movement in a broader sense than just within the context of yoga movement, yoga asana.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably one of those people under that umbrella of like, I just found yoga very stressful. Very, and I think because I'm not a structured, rules-based person by nature, that I found it I just found it a very stressful environment. Yeah. And yet there was there's a movement appeal to it, but it was like, this isn't my happy place of movement.
Yeah.
Like even the mat, even like the lining up of the mats, so like I really have an issue with mats. I'm really like, you know, you have to be able to be happy to move on the ground, like without a mat, beyond the
Yes.
edges of the mat. And I have some really good friends who've gone through 200-hour yoga training, and a lot of where I'm based here in Southern California, there's a lot of people who come to do trauma-informed yoga-based training. And there seems to be a widening of this, like, let's all move. And you can still honor these traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, for me, there's always value in every system. Like if someone says like, oh, like CrossFit's awful, it's like, no, there's some value in there. And like yoga's awful. Like, no, it's not. Like there's value there. There's value in all of these things. And I think finding the recipe, and what I love, or what I've been drawn to with your work as well, is that it really seems to encompass this notion of really being 360 degrees strong.
Yeah.
So how have your moves played, and
Yeah.
how did you find your body responded as you were going down your own research path?
Oh, yeah. Well, I at one time was just very focused on doing the yoga poses really correct and perfect. And, I thought that was some kind of worthwhile and long-term goal, but they after a certain point just had diminishing returns. I needed more than just yoga on my yoga mat. And as we age, as I've aged in over 40, I mean, to put it on any one system, right, isn't correct. Even though it's a word I try not to use, right? But like we can't just do one thing to serve all our needs, just like we can't eat one food to get all of our nutrients, right? So in yoga was very much sold that way, in that you just practice all is coming. And it's kind of this you do your yoga practice and you're good, you got all your bases covered. And I just found that not to be true. And I, again, as I studied movement and expanded out, again, even with ballet and stuff, right? So like we weren't, at least when I was in it, now this is a long time ago, but strength training and lifting weights was definitely not a part of cross training for me in ballet. I see it more and more now, and I'm so happy about it. But so strength training was not in my background, so that was all new. And as I kind of endeavored into that, and just felt so much better in my own body with aches and pains, and it made my yoga practice feel better. And so, yeah, I, again, choosing what hill you die on. I just, there's not just one system, and there's not, like you say, I agree with you. Like there's value in all of them. We need a little diversity in our movement, and just that diversity of options for ways for people to move, so that everybody can, or everybody that wants to, can benefit and feel good from that practice.
Definitely. And I think, there's always been this idea with some things of, and I kind of really, I almost, I admire the people who are so purist. And at the same time, I get a bit pissed off with them, like leave your dogma alone, because,
Yeah.
This isn't working for those people. And everyone who has a body has the right to move. And, it's really how we move through the world. And this is the physicality of how we're doing that movement, and not, in like, not everyone, one of my kind of parkour teachers always said, everyone can do parkour, but parkour is not for everyone.
Yes.
And it's this thing of like, we can all move, but I like to use the analogy of, movement is like music. Like not everyone needs to be the drummer, not everyone needs to play the cello or the violin. It's like there are so many different flavors and textures. And if you're an introvert and you like quiet things, and you like being in nature, like to go to a spin class is just a nightmare, and your body's going to really not respond well to that, or to that training. But
yeah,
everyone can benefit from better mobility, more strength, more sustainability, more creativity, more options. And I don't know whether it's just because of some of the movement worlds I've been in that are predominantly run by men as well. Like the last thing those leaders want to do is have any collaboration with anyone else, or
Yeah.
or give merit to other movement systems, which is always like, really, come on, like you're not the be all and end all. Like the thing you do is not the be all and end all. So there's this kind of constant humility and research of like, let's go play with movement, let's go and find the value and do those things. And so what are the beautiful things that people can take from yoga in terms of like, what is the best of the best? Like where, because I don't want to be kind of like just bashing yoga just because
Yeah,
it
sure.
wasn't
Yeah.
my thing. And actually thinking back, it was actually a friend of mine who is a yoga teacher who said, you need to follow Trish. Like this is your kind of movement where you can get the best
Yeah.
of those things and of those worlds.
Uh-huh.
But what do you mean? What are the some of the key attributes of yoga that
Yeah.
still are thread through your work and everything you share?
Well, I think just body awareness, number one, right off the bat. Mindfulness, right? Just the body awareness, the kind of time and attention that's given to noticing how you feel when you move. I think, another kind of fitness genres or group fitness, there isn't necessarily that ingredient built in, right? You're working out for that purpose of working out, it's a workout, and it's, maybe it's included, but it's certainly not kind of the root of it. And with yoga, for me, it's the body awareness that it can build. It's the opportunity to notice how you feel when you're moving, to be able to notice like, oh, does this kind of feel sticky or stuck? Is this maybe an area that could use more attention, or what feels good? So I think off the bat for me, with yoga, it's always been that body awareness, mindfulness, and just the space that's given and held to just notice how you feel being in your body.
Definitely. And I know this idea of time, like in some parkour classes I would do, my teachers would say like, okay, you're just going to go and do that one move, but you're just going to go and do that now for like 20, 30 minutes. And every repetition is a new move.
Yeah.
There's there really isn't any repetition here, even though it may externally look like it. And I want you to be really mindful of that. And these people who really were at the foreground of kind of changing our idea of what we can do and what the body can, and it's still moving and evolving right now. The things we see online that some of the parkour men and women are doing are like, wow, that's not special effects. That's just like these young people out at the weekend filming stuff on their phones. It's really incredible. And there's this lineage where they gave time to like going out and practicing really small things for a very large amount of time without structure, just this freedom of time. And I know from my own journey that like when I was kind of quote like breaking the jump or doing something that I knew I was physically capable of, but I was mentally too scared to be able to do, that I had to sort of stay in that playground for like 4 hours to the point where I just got bored of the version of me that was too scared to try. Then it was like, oh, okay, look, I'm just going to go home. Otherwise I've got to do it. So there was, time I think is really important. And some movements are so fast and the training is so at pace.
Yes.
That we lose those windows of opportunity to go, hang on a minute. What's happening here? What's happening there?
Yeah.
And conversely, what are some of the biggest myths around yoga that the teachers come to you with?
Well, interestingly enough, I'll get teachers that'll ask me seemingly simple questions like, is it okay to do X? Like insert whatever, because I mean, there's value in systematizing things, right? I mean, our human brain, we organize, and systems help us with that. But as it happens, right, those things can kind of go too far, to the point where we're asking if we can inhale when we do this instead of exhale. So I
That the
think
gods of yoga are gonna
yeah,
thunderbolt you down.
right. So I think it's just like the questions I get are, is it okay if I do it this way? Can I teach it this way? As opposed to the way that is kind of recognized and familiar as the kind of the accepted. It kind of becomes a language, like once you're in that yoga world, right? Like there's just kind of a common language, and that we all kind of understand. And it's kind of to break out of those patterns, those well-worn patterns, can be scary for teachers. And so I think that's where those questions come from. And breaking out of patterns is really something that I like to do, because again, talking about that yoga mat, right? That yoga mat's very forward back, right? Very this way. And so I too love to, if you watch my videos, it's not often that I'm on a yoga mat. I prefer not to be on one myself, but if we're going to move laterally, if we're going to move on diagonals, we have to break out of those well-worn patterns that the yoga mat has kind of provided us for.
Definitely. I mean, I discovered this company who does the round mats, and it was
Yeah.
at the beginning of lockdown when I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to be going to the park. I have this concrete space outside. I'm gonna get that mat.
Yeah.
And it has borne the test of time beautifully. And actually this morning I was outside and I watered the garden and I got the mat really wet. So I just put a towel down, and then afterwards I was like, I don't need a towel. Like I'm fine just on the wood. Like it's actually nice to have this connection with the ground, kind of,
Yeah.
obviously without hurting your body. But that's also a kind of way of building up more
Yeah.
structure and posture and resilience and things like that.
All those good things. I mean, I do love that about yoga for sure too. Yoga asana, right? Is it gets you down on the ground. But again, that can be a barrier for people. We're so used to furniture and living up here. So getting down on the ground, I think it's so basic and obvious that it goes forgotten. But getting down on the ground, I found, can be a real barrier for people. So just doing that is, I think teachers maybe miss that, like, oh yeah, that's a different environment than being up.
Definitely. And also if you go down, you have to get back up.
That's it. That's it.
And
And how often are we bearing weight on the hands and the wrists? Which yoga, if you're doing vinyasa style, which is kind of, what I primarily do and have been in, right? That too is a whole barrier if we're not used to being down on even just hands, knees. Yeah.
Definitely. And there are so many like barriers to participation that I think we as individuals put on ourselves, of I'm not the sort of person to do that. And then, you go to a class, and so I'm very rarely in a yoga studio or anything like that. And I actually went to one a couple of weeks ago. It's for an amazing breathwork event, and it was so funny. Like I walked in and I'm like, well, I feel really fat in a yoga studio, which was like, it was such a weird, like, I'm not a fat person in any way, shape or form, but the difference of being in that studio and the majority of the bodies who were around me versus my like natural movement world, or my my midlife women world, and these other worlds, and it was incredibly welcoming. But that was me, that was my voice. I'm not putting anything on the event or anything else, but it was like, oh wow, I had that reaction of like, huh, it's like, oh, I've got that little soft tummy roll. Okay, well, I'm kind of aware of it with all these mirrors and stuff, like, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm very, it's wonderful to see so many movement educators who are having discussions about these kind of things and these barriers to participation, so that we can bring more people to this joy of movement, I think.
Yes. I'll say too, I've stuck with yoga, even as, sometimes I'll kind of get maybe some comments like why I critique yoga or why am I talking bad about it, and, critical, and that, I mean, also with having gone through a master's program and, you learn those critical analysis skills, critical thinking, anything worth endeavoring into long term is absolutely worth critical thinking, critical analysis, so we can improve it and make it better. And so, sometimes you'll kind of run into that defensiveness from folks, but I've stuck with yoga through that because I do value it so much and see the value in it, and in the ways that I've adapted it, and have been able to widen circles of access and make it a practice that can help folks the way that I want it to. And then so the critical thinking thing is important. Critical analysis to just better improve and make a system better. And so we've got some of these things with yoga where it's talks about tradition and this ancient practice, but we also have to consider the time we're living in. It's 2023, and the way that we as humans are existing in the world, the way that we sit at desks, not that sitting's bad, right? But you spend any position for 8 hours, it's maybe going to be problematic. So we have to consider the way humans move now versus the way humans were moving maybe 100 years ago, and make some improvements. And that's why I stick with it.
No, I love it. And I'm a big fan of critical thinking. If someone says you can't ask questions, it's like, that's just an invitation to ask more, because there's obviously some resistance here. And to also have this, original contribution to knowledge. That's what critical thinking really allows us to do. And that's when, whether if you've gone through like a master's or a PhD or something like that, I remember when I was doing mine, I was told like, okay, Julie, like we understand it. Like you love parkour. Okay. But this isn't a propaganda essay. This is let's be critical here and see, like, does it stand the test of time? Can it withstand these questions? Can it withstand? And then also, what a beautiful thing that, because culture isn't fixed. Culture is this mercurial morphing thing that we all get to actually contribute to, instead of just like, well, and also, it really helps when you understand where something came from. It's easier to understand what it is, but then how you practically apply that and how you move around that and with that and for different purposes, that's a whole other discussion. And I think the lack of critical thinking around some movement practices does a disservice to those movement practices. So I really like those debates. And then someone will go, oh, you're a hater on that. It's like, when did this lost art of debate suddenly become so unvalued? And also, I also understand that when people are so invested personally, then, if you say something about the practice, they think you're saying something about them. And it's like, no, we're talking about the practice or the culture of that. It's really, and that's it. I hope that across different movement worlds, I hope that those debates continue and nurture this cross-pollination, and because it can sit alongside a recognition of lineage and history and tradition. And then, as you say, like it's 2023. There's, I love the ancestral health community, and all of their wisdom. And it's also like, well, we're kind of living with a lot more stressors now, or a very different set of stressors, a very different pace, a very different set of high constant stimulation. So there is for them, there's an evolutionary mismatch. And I think, that's kind of scalable. So I know you talk about trying to make, not trying to, but teaching movement in a way that's very kind, that gives people confidence. And this really resonates with me. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Just within my decade of teaching yoga classes in a studio setting, I also, I saw a lot of things, but one of them was just kind of how hard people were on their bodies. Even though it's yoga, I saw people really push and extend themselves beyond, maybe what they would want for a friend or a loved one. People would come in with injuries and, apologize for not doing their best, or apologize for not being 100%, or they'd disclose an injury, but then not modify to kind of navigate that injury. And so I just saw, again, I know, right, that we're all conditioned within the culture and society in which we live. And so those sorts of things are part and parcel of toxic fitness culture. And so this idea of burning and shredding and blasting, insert any number of adjectives there. And so I took to this idea of moving kindly and competently to kind of counter that, right? We can still challenge ourselves and have a good, robust workout or movement session, and still do that in a kind way. So I don't think like movement or fitness that's challenging has to also be punishing, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. I think it actually involves, like, challenges and invite opportunities for more compassion than for more criticism.
So I just witnessed so much of that on the yoga mat. And gosh, it just, after a while, like, I don't know. So I just wanted to somehow counter that and drop little seeds that, hey, you don't have to torture yourself here to get a good movement session in, and you don't have to feel like pain in order to be strong. Like, so kind of just had to unpack a lot of that. And that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I think
showing what comfortable movement looks like. And it doesn't mean we're just laying on the floor with a pillow. Okay. It can be an active, engaging movement.
absolutely. And also this notion that, you have to be really sore. It has to suck for you to get strong.
Yeah.
Is like, that's so ridiculous.
I would have folks come into the studio and check in and ask me to kick their butt. That, like, it's not what I do, and it's just even more bizarre in the fact that it's a yoga studio and they're asking for that. It's not like I was at a CrossFit gym or some other, but so that, and I'm not picking on those people at all. Like, I understand where it comes from. I've been in that space. I've been in all these spaces that I'm talking about. It's not like I have repeated and done all of these things that I'm now trying to change and make better. So again, it's just the influence of the fitness culture, and that is front and center on all of our screens. And yeah.
And I think, I've ended up being a movement coach, and I don't have a background in fitness. My background is in creative industries and documentary filmmaking, but following and documenting you know, the parkour community as it was kind of evolving in the UK. And these also weren't people who were, they were, you know, creating a lot of rules and ideas of their own being. So they came from a very different kind of mindset. And when more traditional kind of fitness people came, they couldn't do the things the parkour people were doing. So the parkour people were like, fitness, like that's kind of not for us. And then, so then they just, and now what's happening is a really beautiful kind of sharing of ideas, but it's almost like the respect has to be earned. So now, you know, fitness will be like, okay, actually these parkour people may be onto something because they seem to be doing this, and then they don't actually get hurt very much. There's a very low injury rate because it's a very mindful practice. It's a very integrated mind body. There's an emotionality to the challenges. Like you can't be not present when you're walking on a railing. It's like you are, there's a very nowness, there's a very, you're present in the practice. There's no mindless reps, there's no, because, and especially when you're out in the environment, it's like, we're not sociopaths. Everyone wants to, our body will always kind of protect us. And I think there's something also within some locations that kind of almost like distract us from that awareness, whether it's like the music's too loud or the lighting's this, or there's some things that, whereas when you're outside and it's like, well, you can hear the birds, you can hear the trees, or you can hear the cars, it's sort of, there's more space for you to hear you, I think. So tell me a little bit more of your strength journey, because I mean, number one, dancers are strong as hell.
Yeah.
Dive instructors, strong as hell. Like you're carrying tanks. I just did a grip test on a friend of mine who's the same age, and she hasn't really moved for the past 3-4 years, but she was a dive instructor for 15 years, and it was like solid musculature still, like
Yeah.
you know, doing. So how was that journey for you?
For strength, I started into strength training. Let's see now. Before maybe 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, and I first got into kettlebells. So I went and took a class, and then from there it was a kind of a small gym environment, and so just learning the technique of the kettlebell and navigating that and moving with it. I was drawn to it because, again, there's an element of flow and movement with the kettlebell. So I took to that straight away. And what's great about kettlebells is, you know, I didn't have to worry so much about picking up a 2-pound or a 5-pound kettlebell, right? I mean, straight away, we're starting with 15 or 20 pounds. So it only went up from there. From that, again, I just a curious person, right? And so I went into learning how to back squat with a barbell. And that right there was, I think, what hooked me for good, because I just loved the strength that I felt in working with with the barbell, and how you can just kind of adapt. And I like the slow progression of adding weight and how your body adapts, and then, you know, getting stronger. And again, I like that it's not fast. So there was a mindfulness to it for me, and you have to be present and focused, because you have to feel, right, as you're squatting.
Heavy.
Heavy. So I felt a real regulation to my nervous system that was really powerful, maybe even beyond what I'd experienced with yoga. I think with strength, weightlifting, maybe we don't always think of that as a mindful practice, or at least what we see again in media, right? We have that image of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and but I found a very different experience. And so I love to bring that to my private clients. I do a lot of strength training with my private clients. And that is what I drive home straight away, right? Is this isn't fast. We're not doing like all these reps. And that allows for you to actually lift heavier and to be stronger in that way. Because it's actually strength, right? Versus endurance of like Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
that,
I find like deadlift sessions like really chilled.
yes.
It's just
Yes.
like, you do a couple of lifts
Yeah.
and then I walk around for 5 minutes.
Right. I love
Then I
the
go do a couple
built-in
more.
rest. I love that there's built-in rest. There has to be when you're
Yeah.
lifting heavy like that. So, um, right, like yoga doesn't own mindfulness. We can find mindfulness in these other practices, and I that's been an important thing that I've been able to share with people and show firsthand, and it's quite lovely.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, Ellen Langer always says, you know, being mindful means just noticing things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so to notice things is, well, to notice, okay, oh, is my hair there? Or like, oh, how do I feel there? How does this shoulder feel versus this shoulder? Or how do my feet feel right now based on the floor and things like that. And then, yeah, when things are too fast and distracted, we miss the opportunity. It's like, driving past a house versus cycling past a house versus walking past a house. Like, and then asking someone, tell me about the garden. And it's like, I don't know, is it a blue house, a gray house? I don't know. And there's different times for those things. So how has it been for you going online and in terms of
Yeah.
your reach and your message and sharing these really 360-degree kind of, thinking about not having a set practice, but thinking about movement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been great. Honestly, obviously, the pandemic was
It
not
was what it
something we
was.
could
Yeah, yeah.
invite or want, but it did obviously shift how we shared and connected, and being online has been just invaluable there. And I've been able to connect with, even before that, really, like Instagram was really just for all the kind of negative of social media, I've connected and met wonderful people in community, other like-minded folks that I don't have here locally where I'm at. And so that has always been something I've cherished and still do. And so, yes, I've shifted to offering classes online and webinars and trainings. And I enjoy it. It allows me to share like what I do and my work, my body of work with movement, and the folks that want to move that way or are curious about it can find me and share in that. And so that has been that's just been great all around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's space for all of us. And I
Mm-hmm.
know for me, likewise, it's been like, oh, there's these other people doing the crawly stuff I like as well. And like, oh, there's other barefoot communities that I didn't know who are doing that. Oh, and there's also women over 40 and over 50 and over 60 who are doing it. Like,
Yeah.
cool. We're not kind of the anomalies. We're not the unicorn, to be active and moving and curious and exploring these ways of being 360 degrees strong, which I really love, and doing a lot of it like barefoot, doing a lot of it on the ground, wrist bearing, all of those kind of things as well. What other kind of discoveries were really prominent in your journey that you now share with others?
I think a big one, again, just because I've, been in the yoga world for a while now. And I think that one of the big discoveries that, again, has played into and influenced my movement journey is coming to learn and understand about alignment, and that it's not the end all be all in terms of safety and preventing injury, right? So it's not the visual alignment, it's not the aesthetic that protects us or saves us from injury. So understanding that, again, that movement science, that broader understanding of movement science and the human body as a mover. So that was a big thing, because within yoga, there's a lot of not wanting to get hurt and protect and correct. With Ashtanga, the alignment and how it looks is very important. It's one of the main things there. And so I was unlearning. There was a lot of unlearning for me as I did expand out and allowed other movement styles to seep in, that I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I tried to do the alignment just right and exact, and I still got injured. Like, there's no like, yeah, like angle or degree of an angle in a joint that's gonna be the specific spot where no injury will ever happen.
You're bulletproof. There you go. Yeah.
So it was unlearning that. It was unlearning the alignment rules, and in terms of how pain and injury work and correlation and causation. So, which allowed a more freedom. It allowed for more movement. It allowed for more curiosity. And again, to share that, right? I set all the rules, I set all the cues. So it's not like I never did that. I repeated as I was taught, but then now I've learned more and I understand more. And so now, there's just certain cues that, in certain things I just don't say anymore because I don't need to.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's that thing of, we've all seen people, or, I've seen so many occasions where you see someone in the gym and they're, like, perfect setup with equipment that's been perfectly designed, perfect thing. And then you watch them and then they go outside and they like trip over the pavement, or, they put their back out, putting a mug back up on the shelf in the cupboard. Because, our training doesn't exist in a vacuum, where we have life and how we move our body through life, like simply getting a bag of dog food out of the backseat of the car.
Yes. I use that analogy all the time about moving outside of the yoga studio, right? Like, it's not a vacuum. And it's so wild, because even I believed that and practiced and taught that. And it's like, how'd we all miss that? I mean, yeah, we go and we sit on our couch, or we sleep at night and roll, and then I still will get comments on my Instagram videos like, oh, you shouldn't cross the midline like that until you're warmed up. I'm like, how have I made it this long in the world without,
like, it's amazing.
Like, I don't know. Yeah. And
it's kind of wild.
It's just, I think, broadening out, like, watch a football game or watch modern dancers. I'll often refer to modern dancers because I did modern dance as well. So, there's a lot of rolling on the floor. There's a lot of knees going over ankles and toes. And so,
I mean, tell a climber, tell someone who goes bouldering every weekend, oh, your knees can't go over your toes. Be like, I can't reach the first thing.
Yeah.
And how long have people been climbing up rocks? Since the dawn of time.
Right. So that, that unlearning, that whole umbrella, that right there was, was and is huge, and is still a thing, right? Like, I mean, I think yoga is a much better and much better space than it was 10, 15 years ago. But gosh, just when I think we've sorted it all out, it's like, oh no, it's always new to someone, right? So it's still always new to someone. So the work continues.
Always. And unlearning is so much harder than learning. As an adult, just our neural pathways are like, no, this is how we do, this is how we do, this is how we do. And then it's like, no, but resistance and then social stigma and pressure. And then and I know for me, when I'm, going down new rabbit holes and curious and wandering around movement as well, I'm always like, but am I right? Like, I don't know. I'm just over here and doing my little thing, and I don't know. But then you kind of keep doing it, and then you share it, and like, well, okay, like, surely it's okay to unlearn. Surely it's okay to have a body that you want to move in different ways at different times in different contexts, because not every day is the day when also you're like, our body is different every day. Nervous system is different every day. Like a couple of days ago, I didn't have one pull up. Like, did I suddenly not have pull-ups? Like, no, I was just really tired, and I was there, and I was and then today, like, there's 4. It's like, okay, that's really great. Like, every day is like, it's a very constantly curious thing that I like to say hello to, of just like, oh, let's see how movement feels today.
Yes. And I think when we take that approach, it really takes the pressure off, and it allows us to not be so hard on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that, getting it right, or frustration because you can't do a thing. It's like, well, that might just be today, because especially if you have done it in the past and then you can't today, it's like, no, it's in flux, right? And so many things play into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think last week I had 3 conversations with clients, and it was all about the I should, I could, I would have, I should have mindset.
Yeah.
And to really, and for all of us to undo that work of this perpetuating performance anxiety.
Mhm.
We're like, no one else cares. Like, you're not going to get a medal, you're not going to get a certificate, nothing. But my gosh, the trash talk that people do to themselves on the I should, especially as women get are aging.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with a lot of women in their 50s and 60s, and I'm 53. And so it's very like, oh, well, I used to be able to, I used to. And it's like, well, we've only got a body that's here right now.
Yes. Well, yes, that's the other thing too, is like, our body, and I think it's a relief. The pressure is off when we realize like our bodies adapt to the things we're doing the most. And if you're not doing a thing, well, then why would you expect your body to still be able to do that thing? Or, like, when's the last time you did it? Oh, 10 years? Well, your body is efficient. It's only there to stay alive with the least expenditure possible.
Use it or lose it, use it and keep it. It's
Yeah.
like there's no sort of shortcuts around that. And yeah, when people say like, but Julie, I did this breathwork thing and the score didn't move, and I'll be like, oh, how much practice did you do? Oh, I only did it the one time. I'm like, okay. No mystery. Like,
All right.
that'll be why. And I think, we're always looking for nice shortcuts and
Sure.
the easy route. And again, maybe not having to both apply our own critical thinking and to also take responsibility, to have this kind of radical responsibility of, well, what we choose to do and not choose to do. But then that also feeds into this more complex notion of these barriers to participation for movement. Where do you feel welcome? Where are those spaces? What happens in those spaces? All of those things. So when you're not moving, and I'm thinking you move a lot.
Yeah.
What are you doing for fun that isn't in the realm of the kind of movement we've been talking about?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Because, yeah, I really do like a lot of the things that are fun for me involve movement. But I like to read. I love to learn, so I do a lot of reading. And I love that this is like a thing now that you can select as a hobby, like when you're filling out a thing. But I like to stream television. I like to watch streaming. So, if it's not movement, if I want to go total opposite, then it's streaming TV. I enjoy,
Yeah,
streaming shows. There's lots of good creative shows, and I
so many.
enjoy doing that.
Yeah. And you're also allowing your body to recover.
Yeah. And I think a little good old fashioned escape is a
Love
healthy,
it.
and right. So
Love it. Give me an
that's
action thriller, and I'm like,
yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
So I've been enjoying that in the last couple of years here, is with just yeah, there's so many different amazing shows to choose from. So I enjoy that. Podcasts, show streaming, and reading. I like to, well, see, that's movement though. This year, really, I've gone to town and gardening and kind of landscaping my yard. But that is movement, but I do enjoy that.
And what kind of movement rabbit holes or journeys are you on at the moment? Where's your
Yeah. Because I too can get into patterns and grooves because it feels good to do the things that we're good at already or familiar. But yeah, so I actually have been looking at learning to longboard, not surfing, but
Yeah.
skateboard longboard.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love to watch some of these female longboarders. Again, it's a very fluid
Is it the
dance.
slalom stuff or the
Yes,
downhills? Yeah.
yes. So I just, it's so fascinating to watch. And again, because there's a lot of movement at the knee, there's a lot of lateral movement. And I'm really fascinated by that because again, with yoga and even just fitness at large, there's this kind of panic around lateral knee movement. So I'm looking at learning to do that. I'm going to be taking some training on that. So that's kind of my latest movement.
I love it. And what would be your kind of final message or something that you'd like to share that maybe we haven't touched on, and we can completely go there as well? What's burning inside you to share?
Gosh, what is burning inside me? I guess, well, I think in terms of, I've really just this last year been on this messaging to reach yoga teachers, because it can be kind of a tricky, sticky place to navigate depending on where you're located, and if you're kind of one of those more curious cats like I am, and not everybody's inclined to embrace that. And so if you're one of those like I am, I don't know, I've just been kind of just inclined to share and connect with folks like that and let them know that it's almost like I'm kind of writing love notes to myself, an earlier version of myself, because it just feels so good now at where I'm at to be able to share and do the work I'm doing with movement and yoga and not feel judged or boxed in or like, what weird other planet are you from? And I think that just sharing that has been such a nice kind of healing thing for me. And then also it's great. I often hear from other yoga teachers like thanking me for sharing what I share, and that it's, kind of
being the voice,
new insights for them. So I just, that's kind of to touch on that a little bit. That's just another added bonus to all of this.
Yeah. And where can people find you?
I'm extremely online. So you can find me on Instagram at Trisha, OHTRISHA. Yeah, you can Google me. Like you mentioned, I wrote a book called Movement Snacks. That was just to have something tangible that you could hold in your hands. It's not yoga specific. It's this idea, maybe this is what I should have answered with, right? Is this, that movement doesn't have to happen in a studio. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have specific clothes on, that you can find movement wherever you are, whether it's behind your desk, in a waiting room, at line at Target, right? That we are once and always a mover. And so that's what that little tiny book is that I created.
That's music to my ears. It's like, it's a love letter to movement. And to yourself. I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. But one more thing. If someone has never seen anything of what you do, how would you put in words to describe what you do if someone had never seen it?
This is a good question. This is probably, if I knew this answer, it would really help me really.
We can spitball it. We're going to get an answer.
Target audience and niche it down really good, right? So that's good. Yeah, I've always struggled with a elevator speech because that's why systems are good, because then it's easy to say. I would say though, if I had to come up with something off the cuff here, it would just be that I teach movement that helps you feel calm and strong.
Yeah. And those are things that I'm all about and love. And I just love that, there's so many ways to do this. And when we can take and borrow and blend these other systems and take the best of them and adapt them.
Yes.
For so many people to have then an inroad.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, it's not just red, yellow, green. We haven't just got the primary colors of movement. We've got a whole
yeah.
hand tones.
Solve every problem. You don't have to solve everybody's every problem, right? So kind of just zoom in on what your thing is, and it doesn't have to, because it can look like a lot, like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin, right? But like, at least as a movement teacher, yoga teacher, right? Like, you don't have to solve everything, and you don't have to be everybody's teacher, which is a relief.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
finding what your thing is and what you're good at in terms of, from the teacher standpoint anyway, and with movement, if you're the practitioner, right? Like, it doesn't have to be fancy, elaborate.
I'm so not fancy and elaborate.
Start small, and it will just allow it to bloom.
Yeah. And what would be someone's first step?
Get down on the ground.
Yes.
I think you and I can both just sit on the ground.
Yeah.
However, and just start there. I mean, we get on the ground with yoga poses, and then we say, okay, fold forward. Well, a lot of people can't even fold forward. I started saying, like, let's just get on the ground and sit, right? You don't even have to add the forward fold. That can come later, maybe, if you want it to, but like, just get out on the ground. It will make you hellaciously strong if you spin. Again, we think we have to get down there and do some elaborate roll or something, but just get down there at first.
Get down there, hang out. And I've got to the point where I just say to people, like, just get down on the floor and mess around.
Yeah.
Maybe you want, just mess around on the floor.
Just see if you can find a comfortable position. Like, start there. And if not, okay, well, let me use a pillow or a prop or something.
Then not so groundy. Yeah, like halfway. Yeah. Well, thank you, Trish. I'm like, thank you for everything you do, and for sharing today on the podcast, and to be able to connect with you. I'm sure like these conversations are just going to continue. Thank you for your contribution to the movement world.
Thank you. Yay.
And so where can people can find you on your website, Instagram?
Yes. That's it, mainly like Instagram at Trisha, and my website, which is trisha.yoga, is my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Thank you.
I'll stop recording. Yay.